This week on Africa Weekly, we meet the survivors of Kenya's last post-election bloodshed 10 years on. We hear a rare success story in South Africa's controversial land ownership debate. And we stay in South Africa for a traditional ballet that's been given a modern twist. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. Provisional results show Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta in the lead in the country's disputed general election. Days of deadly violence followed opposition candidate Raila Odinga's rejection of an early tally showing Kenyatta's unassailable lead, which Odinga claimed was due to a massive hacking attack.
The 2017 general election was a fraud. In his words, Uhuru said that he did not need voters to win. The hacking has definitely affected the results of the 2017 general elections. It's a tragedy of monumental proportions and a total disaster.
2 people were shot dead by police in the capital on Wednesday during angry protests, and another 2 for allegedly attacking a poll station. Just 1 week before the polls, a top electoral official was tortured and killed. The bloodshed comes a decade after a disputed poll which Odinga lost to former President Mwai Kibaki led to 2 months of clashes that left 1,100 people dead and 600,000 displaced. President Jacob Zuma survived a parliamentary vote of no confidence on Tuesday, which fell short by just 24 votes needed to secure a majority. Deep divisions have scarred the ruling ANC party as criticism of Zuma has grown amid multiple corruption scandals and a declining economy. Several opposition parties protested outside the National Assembly before the vote, while supporters of the president held a rival march in Cape Town. Zuma is due to step down as the head of the ANC by December and as president before the 2019 general election. Opposition groups in the Democratic Republic of Congo launched a 2-day general strike in an attempt to pressure President Joseph Kabila to adopt a 3-month-old power-sharing deal and set an election date. This came a day after 12 people were shot dead during an anti-government rampage in the capital. Around 2/3 of businesses and banks closed during the strike, although the city did not grind to a halt. Mauritanians have voted for a new constitution, which includes abolishing their Senate and changing their national flag. 85% voted yes to the amendments, which were rejected by the Senate in March, despite criticism from a mass boycott movement who are refusing to recognize the results. Around 1.4 million Mauritanians are eligible to vote, but only 53% of the population turned out on the day. The flag will now feature red bands to honor the blood spilled by those who fought for freedom from colonial master France.
Penina lost her husband 10 years ago in the violence that broke out in the wake of Kenya's presidential poll. The disputed re-election of Mwai Kibaki in December 2007 threw the country into political and ethnic conflict, killing over 1,000 people. Almost a decade later, the memories of those dark days are still raw.
I saw terrible things. My husband being attacked with a machete. I was sitting in the car, he was driving, and a friend had her child on her lap next to me. The child was hit by an arrow in the head. It was very violent. People were being beaten up. We were forced out of the car and then hit with stones. I myself had my skull cracked by a stone.
Somehow the mother of 10 survived, but it was just the start of her troubles. She received only €280 in compensation, which she immediately spent on school fees. The Kenyan government launched its programme to compensate and rehouse victims of the violence in 2008. But many like Penina are still waiting. In the meantime, she and a dozen other families are stuck in an illegal camp.
They said that this land would be subdivided amongst us, but still nothing has happened. We've been waiting years.
Ahead of this year's elections, analysts warned that more violence would be likely in the event of alleged fraud.
If it's free and fair, there's no violence. But let me assure you, if it's rigged, there will be violence.
This week clashes have broken out as long-time opposition leader Raila Odinga claimed a massive hacking attack manipulated results. And people like Penina know only too well how post-election violence can ruin lives.
As the South African economy struggles and political tensions rise, land ownership has become a highly charged issue. More than 2 decades since the end of apartheid, frustration has grown over the ruling African National Congress's failure to spread the country's resources. The Molotele tribe won a rare court victory in 2002, which allowed them to reoccupy land which traditionally belonged to them.
The main reason for our success, let me say, the first one is the stability of the community. You know, if the community is not stable, then really you are going to experience problems, because they will mushroom a consent group or differing ideas of how you should run the farms, and then ultimately then the business will collapse.
It wasn't an easy start for the Molotele farming community. A lack in financial resources and technical know-how sent their first farm into liquidation. But in 2014, after realizing they couldn't do it alone, they reached out to local commercial farmers like Peter Schultz.
Within 3 years, we fully developed all the farms. It's about 160 hectares of orchards, or even more. And yeah, even last year, after the second year, we already paid a profit over to them. It was small, and this year it's going to be a much bigger profit. And yeah, we just want the farms to be profitable, successful.
This partnership has created jobs for the community, and 14 students have been awarded bursaries by the local farmers. For Schultz, it's not just about developing the farms and making them profitable, but lifting communities with training programs in sustainable farming and management. In other areas of South Africa, this is rarely the case.
In a number of projects or land that was transferred to communities that it ended up being unproductive, which is why organizations such as us as Vumelani, we've partnered with the Department of Rural Development to make sure that we can turn that around, working jointly with the communities, with the private sector and with government.
With only 3% of the country's land transferred and growing calls to take land without compensation, many hope that the Molotele case could be a lesson for South Africa.
Dancing gracefully in ballet shoes and sneakers. Big City, Big Dreams is Joburg Ballet's latest show, created and performed in collaboration with 2 contemporary dance companies. It's given South Africa's National Ballet Company the chance to prove it can innovate.
It's a big transition from producing Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, the big classicals, to producing a ballet that's a little bit more African contemporary, a little bit more modern. It's about these 3 unique companies coming together and creating a language that's different, that hasn't been seen before, embracing the African culture, the heritage, with the classical nuances that the classical ballet does so well.
The show transports the audience to the noisy streets of Johannesburg, telling the story of a young man who tries to escape his hectic work life in search of love and new adventures. 3 choreographers composed the performance, fusing classical ballet with contemporary and street dance, its mix of styles posing a challenge for the dancers.
I have to be in such a deep plie, and because of my long legs and the strength that it needs to be so down the whole time, that was for me, it was the hardest.
Despite the difficulties, the dancers from different professional backgrounds have enjoyed the experience. For them, this urban love story gives classical ballet a new lease of life.
It's like, instead of being rigid and being straight up, we have like a flow in the movement, so we're bringing life to something that's very straight. So this bar is so straight, but we're bringing a curve to it.
By showing city life on stage, Joburg Ballet hopes to attract younger and more diverse fans, updating classical ballet for an urban African audience.
South Africa's Van Niekerk won gold in the 400-metre race at the IAAF Athletics Championships in London, helped in part by the absence of his rival, Botswana's Isaac Makwala, who was barred from taking part due to a suspected bout of gastroenteritis. Next week we go to Senegal, where marine archaeologists are looking at shipwrecks once packed with slaves that now lie somewhere beneath the Atlantic waves. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.